I jump out of an aircraft, right. I might get injured. Yes, you deal with them consequences. But for me, we need to move to a point. Again, we're coming back to that thing about not accepting laws that destroy justice, fairness, and everything. What would change this world overnight, for me, is if people started doing what they knew to be right and dealing with situations all the time as we go through our daily life on the basis not is what's right for me in the moment, how do I come out smelling the roses, how do I do this, and oh, well, what are the consequences for me for doing what I know to be right? Ditch all that, and we start doing what we know to be right. And we make our decisions based on what is fair and what is just and what is right in the circumstances that we're facing. Everything kind of changes then, because most people, not least through fear and all the other programming that people get, is they're making these daily decisions based on what about me, what's in it for me, or what are the consequences for me. How do I get the best deal so they don't get the best deal? And as a result, that's the world we live in. I mean, you see the extremes of it in Wall Street and the City of London and Goldman Sachs, but the basic same theme is playing out all the way through society. It's interesting where you see these blueprints that are playing out at every level, right? I'm saying that those within the moon are parasiting off human society. But then you go down human society and different levels of parasiting off others, and you get right down into the body, and there's parasites feeding off your bloody body. There's probably parasites feeding off parasites. It's like a holographic, as above, so below, going all the way through society. And if we stop parasiting off others, and we, instead of saying, for me to win, you must lose, we become conscious and we say, well, look, how do we get a win-win situation here? Instead of one having to win and one having to lose, how do we get a win-win situation? You might have a situation where a load of kids want a loud party, here. And these residents here don't want the loud party. Now, in the way that we perceive now, it's either or. It's like either the residents win or the young people win. Well, why can't we say, okay, you want the silence, I understand that, and you want your party, I understand that. Okay, how do we get these kids to have their party without other people being affected? There's a way around that. As long as you start, we're going to make sure both of these parties win here. Not that one has to win, so one has to lose. And we can do that in our everyday lives. And sometimes, in the playing out and the equaling out of win-win, sometimes you have to say, well, I could screw you now because of the situation I'm in, but it's not right, it's not fair, and you know what, I'm going to let you have that, and I'm going to, in the face of it, lose in this situation because it's right and just and fair in these circumstances that you should have that. And when we're making decisions like that, everything changes.
That moves away from that reptilian competitive part of the mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What are we competing with each other for?
Yeah.
Why are we? I can understand going on the sports field and you're playing out a bit of... But why are we competing in everyday life with each other? But we are. It's like success is winning. Well, in a win-lose situation, for one person to succeed, someone has to lose. Now, that's not a sane, conscious society. Example, massive example. For the banks to gain, people have to lose their homes. That's the extreme example, but that's it. I mean, any sane society would say, look, a basic right of any sane, decent society is people have a home. So how are we going to restructure this so people have a home and the home does not become subject to in many ways, the foundation of the economy. Oh, house prices have gone up. Oh, goody, goody. More people can't afford them then. What are you talking about? House prices going up are a good thing. House prices coming down are a good thing in a sane society, or house prices not moving. To have one of the basics of life to be an asset, a pawn of an economic gambling almost is just insane. I mean, you know, when you take a deep breath and you look at it again, this world is bloody insane. Its level of a consciousness is shocking. Just about enough to breathe and screw the next guy next to you. That's about where most of it is. And I would keep relating this back to the fact that we are being manipulated emotionally and mentally by this moon matrix, which is not only disconnecting us from large amounts of awareness, it's feeding us constantly through the reptilian brain, which I say is like a microchip. When Don Juan Matus in the Castaneda books, Carlos Castaneda books, said the predator gave us their mind, and said that's why our mind is as it is. The predator's mind is full of fear and fear of being found out at any point, because then its way of life is gone and all the rest of it. That collective mind that we're locked into, that I would say collective reptilian mind, is constantly feeding a sense of fear, anxiety, insecurity, and you know, we all kind of know it. When you're sitting there and you feel these senses of insecurity and anxiety sometimes, and you think,
where'd that come from?
Where'd that come from? There's nothing in my life at that moment to make me feel like that, but I do, and I think it's because, I absolutely know it's because we're being fed this collective mind in which we are attached to that predator's insecurity. And this insecurity, when you look at the way insecurity plays out, and this, my goodness, does this explain a lot about the way the system works, the way the Illuminati work, the families. Insecurity has can find no peace in states of flux. Insecurity wants control. Insecurity wants to know what's going to happen next week, because insecurity can't move and think, well, what happens happens, and all that. It can't do that. If that level of insecurity, which I say is the predator's mind, which is feeding off us for as long as we don't know, if it went to a football match, it would have to know the score before the game started. The insecurity and the state of flux of the moving of the game, oh God, they've gone ahead now, oh well, you know, they have to know the score before the game starts. So how they do this is they target all the time controlling both sides. So they'll control the people that are pressing for what they want, and they'll control the groups that are apparently opposing what they want, so the outcome is known before the process starts. This is why the tax-exempt foundations, like the Rockefeller foundations and others, they fund university alleged research, and as even a congressional investigation found at one point, I think it was back in the 50s, that the money was being given by the tax-exempt foundations on the understanding that the outcome of the research was agreed before the money was turned over.
Not unusual in scientific realms as well.
That is the insecurity. They must know the outcome. So
what do we do? What do you do? How are you working your way out of that?
What I'm saying here is that if you bring this through into the connection to humanity of this insecurity, which we're being fed all the time. You know, my mother, she used to say about people, they're only happy when they're worrying, or you know, they're only happy when they're miserable and things like that. You know, because worry is like an addiction. And this is another interesting thing. I wrote years ago about what I called emotional addictions, whereby you get into an emotional state, and of course an emotional state generates a chemical input, a chemical manifestation, and people and the the receptors in the cells that receive things like cocaine and drugs and all the rest of it, they also receive these chemicals produced by emotions. And people get, therefore, bodily addicted to emotions, so that when they're not worrying, we've all met these people, when they're not worrying, they have to find something to worry about to feed their fix. And so we're being fed this insecurity, which is going through the body and generating these addictions to worry and fear and anxiety and all the rest of it. And again,